Welcome to the space where creators have aligned a positive and intellectual collab of open minds. For sharing and learning from one another, it's a vibe. ReadswithRosa podcast on the mic. Subscribe, educator spitting bars. I guess you didn't know I'm multifaceted and humble, taking off life goals. The classroom is my comfort zone where I plant and sow seeds of knowledge, compassion, empathy, and hope. Reading is the key to unlocking your potential. Countless benefits, including cognitive and mental. Regardless of the genre, books are highly influential. Go get yours, I'll get mine. Making strides, monumental. And rock with me and get down to this new jam. With my friends, I had a very simple plan. Educate the masses through books and life lessons. It's the grand slam. I'm out. Bula, Vinaka, kia ora, and welcome to the Reads with Rosa podcast. It's Fijian Language Week in Aotearoa fam, and I am absolutely stoked to introduce today's guest. She is a crime writer, TV presenter, and radio host. Wait a minute. And fencer from Dunedin, New Zealand. She is the author of the best-selling Detective Sam Shepard series and the standalone psychological thriller Faceless. She is of Fijian and European descent. She is also a research fellow at Va'aotaute Center for Pacific Health at the University of Otago. Welcome to the show, Dr. Vanda Symon.
Bula, Rosa, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. If you can't already tell, I'm really just trying to be in control, but I cannot help but be a fangirl. How are you, Vanda? How is good old Dunedin?
Dunedin is fabulous, as awesome, and as always, it's been a wonderful, gloriously sunny day today, and it's doing spring. Although I do note that there might be a cold snap coming, so it is Dunedin.
Dunedin weather's weird like that. We get dunner, stunner, and then it's snowing.
Yes.
So I gotta love Dunedin. Got much love for Dunedin and the people there. Absolutely love that city. Before we get into our kōrero, I just want to give you an opportunity just for a brief intro. Shout out your people, villages, fans.
Yes. Well, I'm Bula, Vinaka. I'm Vanda. As you said, I am of Fijian and European descent. I was born in Tauranga. And my dad was Fijian, my mum European, and most of my brothers and sisters were born in Fiji, and Dad immigrated over earlier on. So I did my primary and intermediate school years at Tauranga, Gretton Primary, Tauranga Intermediate, and then high school in Hastings, Kalamurua High School in Hastings, before moving to Dunedin, and then all over the country for jobs and things, then back to Dunedin. And so I've been here for quite a while now, and Dunedin's what I'm now.
Nice. I have my very first question that I've got in my head right now is, what are your first memories in regards to books and reading?
So I was utterly addicted to books from a very young age. Mum was a school teacher, and we just spent an awful lot of time at the Gretton Public Library because that's where you could get lots of books, and books were an escape for me. So from a large Fijian family, I'm the youngest of 12, and books were my escape portal into this other world. So I have very fond memories of getting lots of books out from the public library, and my very first book obsession started with the Bernstein Bears Almanac, which was a wonderful illustrated book, and I just loved that book so much that I'd get it out from the library. You had 2 weeks that you were allowed to have the book, and I'd take the book back, pop it in the slot in the counter, and then just hang around. Just hang around the library until the librarian put that book back on that return shelf, and then I'd grab it again and then take it and reissue it, take it home again. So I did that several times before sort of got shoulder tapped, and this is a whole other world of books that you can enjoy. So books have always been a huge part of my life.
Did you have a storybook? Were you writing stories from a young age, or not so much?
I always had a big imagination and always liked to write wee stories. In fact, I had my first work published when I was about 8 years old, because way back in the day, the New Zealand Herald used to have like a summer writing competition, and you could write little stories in and send them in, and if you were lucky, they'd get selected and you get published. So yeah, some of my stories got published in that. I'm pretty sure back then they even paid you. So got a little bit of payment for having a story published. So I also just kind of assumed that, as someone who loves to read and loves reading books, that, I just write them one day because, that's what you do, read books, write books. No one told me otherwise, so that's precisely what I did.
Man, like how at that young age did you have the confidence to, like, where did that confidence come from? What I mean is, okay, I'm going to write a story and I'm going to send it into the Herald, and that's just what you do.
Yeah. I was encouraged, of course. Mum encouraged me, and my nana and papa. But also, I was just, have a go at things kind of a girl. So, I wasn't worried about not getting published or failure. I don't think that even occurred to me. It was just, if I sent it in, maybe it would happen. And of course, I was very fortunate and lucky enough that I did get little bits published, which then encourages you to have another go and keep going. And I think that's probably actually one of the themes across my writing career, is that I have been very fortunate in that publishing opportunities came up for me, and I didn't have that many rejections of my work along my life path, because I know there are many writers out there who've had rejection after rejection after rejection, which must be really demoralizing. So I do, recognize that I was truly blessed in having had my work picked up quite quickly when I tried to submit it. Not everyone has been that fortunate.
You've said this about yourself. I am the product of a lifelong love affair with books, and now as a years later, published writer, author. Does that still apply? Explain what that is.
Absolutely. I love reading, and one of the best bits of advice I ever received from people about, if you want to be a writer, is to be a writer, you must read. And I've always loved reading everything. I mean, I'm utterly addicted to newspapers. So I get my newspaper every morning. If I don't sit down with my cup of tea and a chance to read the newspaper, the day is not starting on the right foot, people. So, and I've always been like that with newspapers. I'll read anything, magazines, I read nonfiction, I read fiction, I read children's books, I read young adult books, pretty much anything I can get my hands on. I love essays, I love short stories, I love everything. I'm learning to love poetry. It's taken a while for poetry to spin my wheels, but I think that might possibly have been courtesy of high school and the poetry that you learned in English, which was really, quite frankly, depressing. So I'm learning to love that as an art form, with some, really some of the very witty, but also the really lyrical poets. Learning to read now. So, reading is a really big part of my life. It's part of my, like for many people, I'm sure, it's part of my going to sleep routine. I have to read a wee bit in bed before I can turn the lights out and go to sleep. And if I don't read a wee bit in bed before I turn the lights out, I don't go to sleep. As simple as that. So trying to find time to just sit down and enjoy other people's works is really important. But also, like yourself being a broadcaster, because I'm going to be interviewing people about their books, and one of the pleasures of being an author, and people now trust me to do it, is you get invited to chair sessions where you get to interview other authors at writers' festivals and things like that, which is so exciting. I mean, you get to interviews, you get to try not to fangirl too much.
I've calmed down a bit. If you've noticed, I've taken a deep breath. I'm calm now.
Well done, you. I'm exactly. I know where you're coming from. I like to over prepare, so I read everyone's books before I get, which is great, because it means that you read books that you might not normally pick up. because some people you can get stuck into a bit of a reading rut if you're not careful. And that has been one of the hugest pleasures, I think, about doing the little radio show that I do, which is just on our Otago Access Radio, awesome radio station, fantastic people. But it's, local community radio. And the show I do there, I interview local writers. So it gives people a chance to have get some publicity, because it's really hard to get publicity for your work. Let's be about that. Give them a little practice run before some of them, get interviewed by Kim Hill or someone like that.
Right.
They get Vanda in the cozy little studio in Dunedin first.
Nice.
And through that show, I've read all sorts of books that I would never have picked up in a million years, from like little local histories that are really specific to an area, to biographies about people who I consider obscure but who've led these fascinating lives, to fiction, all sorts of things. So, yeah, it's all like input and food for the mill and the thoughts and everything. And when you're being a creative person and you have so much output all the time, you're always giving out. Writing is very much about output. Reading is fantastic because it's input. It's like nourishment. It's like your food. Food for your brain and your soul.
Oh, I like that. Food for your brain and your soul. I like that. Your undergrad degree was in pharmacy. So I was wondering how you went from community pharmacist to crime scene forensics, to writing about crime scene forensics. Like it's, yeah.
That's funny. So through school and everything, I was very much a sciences girl. So often it's really interesting. People assume that if you write novels that you were an arts and English type of person. But no, I was more interested in physics and chemistry and, making rockets and firing them over the school buildings and that kind of thing. Far more exciting than English and arts. Although I did enjoy that as well. So when it came to university, I actually wanted to tried to get into med school, but I didn't manage to get into med school. So I did pharmacy because, it was again something that was very involved in health, and health is what I was wanting to be in. So I enjoyed my years at pharmacy and graduated in pharmacy, and went out and went to Hawke's Bay and worked in community pharmacy, and I also worked in palliative care in the hospice. And Hastings as well. But in the background, I always knew that I wanted to write novels at some point. I found that with the pharmacy career, because you had to concentrate so hard on your work and you had to be 100% accurate, because if you make a mistake, error in your dispensing, you have the potential to do someone some serious harm. So that level of concentration all day, I was really quite mentally shattered by the end of the day. So I didn't actually get a chance to really embark on the creative writing of it. At that time, my creativity was through my hands. I did a lot of handcraft, quilting and sewing and that kind of thing. But it wasn't really until I had children and took time out to bring up the kids that I had the headspace to be able to finally get on with the creative writing. Now, of course, it's all very well and good to say, I want to write a novel, things like that. It's not quite that straightforward. And I knew I wanted to write, but I wasn't entirely sure what kind of things I wanted to write. There were so many options. So I did a little correspondence course through the New Zealand Institute of Business Studies on creative writing, because it covered everything. It looked at poetry, which I was really bad at. It looked at nonfiction writing, memoir, short story writing. But, I very quickly realised that I was way too verbose for short stories, and novel writing was what I wanted to do. So I took that opportunity when I had the children to write. But of course, you've got to decide, what are you going to write? Advice I'd been given, again, was to write what you love to read. And I loved reading historic fiction at that time. I also loved reading crime fiction. But, I had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old child. And to do historic fiction, you've really, really got to do your research, because you've got to get that historic basis into anything right, because people will pull you up on any errors that you make. Just to date myself a little, this was really before you could Google. That was Google. So a lot of the research you needed to do was actually in libraries and archives, and with books and things, which not that easy to do with a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old. So crime fiction, on the other hand, it was everywhere. It was in your newspapers, crime, elements of that. I also was fortunate enough to have some of my husband's relatives who were involved with the police, and so I could ask questions. And I also had a tame detective across the road whose wife made him sit down and drink coffee with me and answer my weird questions. So I think he quite liked the weird questions. So that's why I decided to write crime fiction. It was an utterly pragmatic choice. It was just, most easiest thing to do research on. And I have absolutely no regrets. I love writing the crime fiction for many reasons. There's the obvious one, it's strangely satisfying, dreaming up weird ways to knock people off and not get caught. Socially, it's a great way to actually comment about society and many issues that are happening in society with marginalised groups and things like that. So it's just a really expressive and fantastic vehicle to be able to do that. So that's how I sort of went into the crime writing. But to then get into the forensic side of things, you've still got to do research.
Right.
So as part of the research, the Otago University here has a summer school. And one of the summer school courses that I was always quite intrigued with was one on forensic biology. So I thought, I could do that course because it was only like about 8 to 10 weeks. And that was doable. This is quite some time down the track. I'd already had a couple of novels under my belt, but I just wanted to do that. And so I did the summer school course. Absolutely loved it. I mean, gosh, forensic science is such a rabbit hole of fascination. I mean, all the things you get to look at, blood spatter and how bullet wounds happen and, all this kind of stuff. So loved the course. And the gentleman, the professor who ran the course, when he found out I was a crime fiction writer, he thought, oh, this is just so funny. And he's like, Vanda, you should do some more study. You should do some more forensics. And muggins that I am. So I did. So I ended up doing, my PhD doctorate is it's in science communication, but it has that forensic science element to it. But also, as a nod to the crime fiction, draws upon the works of Ngaio Marsh and the forensic science isn't that? And that was a really long answer to your question. So
no, you know what? I was getting excited because it was my question that was about to come up, and you mentioned your PhD study, and wow, I was just like, no, I'm gonna let her continue. But yeah, you definitely do not play around. I mean, you commit and you go all the way. How did that then help you become a better crime writer, in terms of all those juicy parts, the science, forensics. Oh man, I'm getting excited here.
In so many different ways. So, for a start, doing a PhD is an exercise in stamina. And and just doing the work, doing the mahi all the time. So, that was really, really important. Of course, from having access, universities have amazing access to libraries and information and just all this stuff that you'd read and discover. It was, fascinating. So, there was that whole element of it as well. And again, putting things into words, quite different in an academic world to a creative fiction world. Unfortunately, in a PhD, you're not allowed to just make stuff up. And when I was writing my thesis, because I'm a crime writer, you leave the surprise to the end, right? In academic writing, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to information at the beginning of the paragraph and then justify it. And I'm like, that was really hard. They wouldn't let me write a thesis where I gave them a surprise ending. What's with that? So you need to learn different writing styles, but it's all practice. It's all different ways of writing. It's all different ways of communicating. And I was quite determined with a thesis to make it really readable, not starchy and stuffy and things like that. So that was, again, another really interesting challenge. But it just all provides, you draw from so many facets of life in your creative work to put it onto the page. And so it's just all adds fuel and broadens your horizon, changes what you might read, who you might encounter, and you bump into fascinating people. So as part of doing my, this is real life examples that ended up in books, in doing the forensic biology course and then starting to do some study, I was in a working lab space with all these other young researchers. And, one of these young researchers, she was doing work on how bodies decompose in water. And she was doing this by going out into Otago Harbour and submerging pigs' heads and seeing how they decompose in water and, doing all the science behind that so that they could help long term, so that when they discovered human bodies who may have been in water, to be able to estimate how long they had been submerged and just to help identify them and help bring justice to these people and for their families. So of course they had to go in a book, didn't it? They had to turn into novels. So things turn up everywhere. So doing that PhD benefited hugely in my creative writing, but also it led to my current career as a researcher at the Wāototai Centre for Pacific Health and doing health research, which I love.
Yeah, well, now that you mention Wāototai, let me jump to that. So can you share some thoughts on the importance of centering Pacific voices and perspectives in the health sector?
It's absolutely vital. I think everybody knows that Māori and Pacific have the worst health statistics in the country. That there are so many factors involved in that, that we need equity, we need access to healthcare, and there are so many things involved in that. Language is a big one. Poverty, where you live, plays a big factor, unfortunately, in your access to healthcare. So for me, my research areas that I look at is dementia and age-specific peoples, but also access to medicines and services, and absolutely passionate about that because it's currently really, really poor and we need to lift that up. One of the really exciting things that I'm able to bring to that, I think, being a creative person, is looking at the language of how we communicate medical information to make it accessible, understandable, and interesting. So that's sort of one of the areas I'm trying to focus on a wee bit, which is exciting. But yeah, it's access to healthcare as well. But the other thing I'm passionate about is bringing through our younger Pacifica healthcare people. So, having our Pacifica doctors, having our Pacifica pharmacists, our Pacifica physios, our Pacifica nurses, so that across all areas of health, we are there and represented and able to help our people, and also Pacifica researchers. So, right. People like me doing research behind the scenes to then go out and help our communities in a really realistic way. So it's exciting, and I love working together. They're great people.
So, health sciences at Otago is huge. I mean, there are so many of our Pacific Island students who go through there and, obviously doing the research. I was wondering, in terms of nationwide, do you and your team or other research teams in the center, do you get to work network with other similar groups or Maori Pasifika centers around New Zealand, or is it more about catering to the area, like the Otago region?
Yeah, we try to network as much as we can because we're all working to that one unified goal, which is improving health, not just within New Zealand, but also to the greater Pacific region. Because where New Zealand is placed, it's not just about who we have here, but all the island, many multiples of island nations around, what we can do to support health throughout there, support getting a Pacific workforce in health sciences throughout the entire region as well. So, we're always trying to collaborate. Otago's very fortunate that we have campuses in Christchurch and in Wellington, so sort of trying to strengthen those. But we also, work with other universities throughout the country because, it's all to that one goal.
Back to Vanda, the author, and the Detective Sam Shepard series. How long did the first book, Overcool, how long did that take you to write, plan, write, get everything down, and then publish?
So that first book, as I said, I had a 6-month-old, a 2-year-old. So my opportunities to get writing time were in snatches of like 20 minutes when maybe by fluke and sheer happenstance, they both happened to be sleeping at once. It didn't happen that often. So that book actually took 4 years from when I first started writing it until I went to the letterbox and got out of the letterbox the book, this parcel that had this amazing thing in it, and I tore it open and cried because here was the published book. So that took 4 years. After that, the books took shorter periods of time to come out because, firstly, the children were a little bit older. Also, each time your craft improves, you become a better writer, you become better at it. You know where the bar is set as far as the level of writing that you need to send in. So your skills improve as well. So the books, took less. So for a while there, I was putting out a book a year. But then again, life changes. You do stupid things like decide to go and do a PhD in the middle of it.
How do you do it? Yeah, I mean, I was just like, wow. Yeah. Did you sleep? Please tell me you had time to sleep and all of that.
What is the strange sleep thing you talk of?
Wow.
Well, and and now the fact of life is I need to have a day job as well because writing doesn't pay the bills. So, and also because I love my day job, I want to be doing that. I really enjoy what I do. So, books now again just take that bit longer to write just because of life, really.
Did you always set out to write a series, or do you know what I mean? Like you started, okay, I'm going to release this number of books. Was that the intention all along for you, or as your writing improved and your craft, became better, you just decided, you know what, let me just surprise my fans. Let me just go back and surprise them.
Question. No. So I wrote the first book, and when I went to pitch it to a publisher, I thought, I've got to be bold and brash about this. So in my covering letter, I put, this is the first in a series of books about Sam Shepard.
Oh,
yeah. I might make it a series. And then lo and behold, when Penguin, which was the second publisher that I even sent this book to, when they got back to me, he rang the Jeff Walker, who was the publisher at Penguin at that time, sort of said, we're really interested in the series. And so, we'd like to publish your book plus more.
Oh.
Wow, that's amazing. Yes, I do have to write this series now. I mean, I already had loads of ideas of next books and what they would be. And I'd even sort of like started writing a second one in that series because as a character, Sam Shepard she'd got in my head. She wasn't going away anytime soon. In fact, she was stroppy and pretty much demanding, hey, you write another book about me, lady. So it was always going to be a series.
Oh, are you Sam Shepard?
No, I'm more the Maggie.
You're more the Maggie? Okay. I was just like, are there elements of you in your characters? Like how do you, are your characters a collective of people that you know personally? Like how do you separate like trying to write a character and think about someone you know, or just are you like, no, it's just...
Yeah. I think many characters are an amalgamation of things. So if I was going to say elements of me that are represented in Sam Shepard, the biggest one would probably be that I am a person who has an optimistic viewpoint. So Sam as a character, she's an optimist. That definitely comes from me. There are other elements of her that are my mum. Physically, I made Sam Shepard quite short. She's just over 5 foot tall. I did my research to make sure what the minimum height for a police officer, for a policewoman was. And, she did scrape in there. But because my mum was small, and she was small and mighty, but she always had part of her lack of self-confidence was feeling that because she was small, people didn't take her seriously. But believe you me, we took her seriously. And so I wanted to put that in this character because if people don't take you seriously, they underestimate you. And if they underestimate you, you can use that as a strength. And so that's why, I made her small of stature. It was going to give her challenges she'd had to overcome, but it also meant she could actually use that to her advantage where necessary as well. So, that's part of Sam's character that I borrowed from my mum. But Sam Shepard, she almost pretty much arrived fully formed. And some of the things she does is the opposite of me. Because, for example, and this is where it's awesome writing fiction, you can make characters everything you're not. So I was raised very well. I was brought up in the church. I was brought up to be polite and everything like that. So I made Sam swear and all the things that I feel like I couldn't be. So I lived a little few of those things through my character.
You're funny.
I'm definitely more Sam Shepard's flatmate Maggie, who's sort of more very much an even Stevens, a leveling kind of a calming kind of a person. That's definitely much more who I am, as opposed to the slightly flighty and a bit brash and has a mouth and not afraid to use it kind of a girl that Sam is.
I listened to the audiobook because, okay, let me just backtrack here. First of all, I can't even remember how I came across you, but it was definitely through AAPI month. And every so often, because of my Bookstagram account, every so often, well, at least once a month, I'm always searching the publishing companies in New Zealand. I'm always Googling, trying to figure out what books are about to be released, what books or authors I have missed and have never heard of. And then I come across New Zealand crime writer, Vanda Symon. I'm like, Vanda Symon? What? Do we have a crime writer that lives in Dunedin? I love Dunedin, so of course I'm curious. Oh my goodness, she's European and Fijian descent. Okay, now I'm hooked. So then I start research, and I'm just like, how have I not heard? Okay, obviously I need to widen my scope. So I'm like buzzing out, like, how have I not heard about you? And then I realized, her book's in audiobook form because I love audiobooks. I do a lot of commuting here, and I commute to work. So if I'm not listening to music, I must listen to an audiobook. It just kind of kills time, and as you mentioned in the beginning, it takes me into another world, into a different creative space. The big reason why I listen to the audiobook is because I was kind of missing home at that time, as it happens, and I really wanted to hear New Zealandish like I wanted to hear the book like how I would imagine it being told in that community. So I was I know that sounds really weird, but I was just like, I need to listen to this instead. And yeah, it was great. Like honestly, yeah, that was my first like Vanda Symon moment. I was like, I need to listen to the audiobook. I don't actually know because I listened to it on Audible, so I don't know if the reader was British or or a New Zealander. To be honest, I don't know, but it just sounded like, oh yeah, this is, if I can imagine a small community like this in the South Island, this is how I imagine the characters to sound.
You
That was
needed
the Symon moment.
I was very fortunate, and my publisher, who I have now, which is Arenda Books in London, they organised being able to have audiobooks, which was
So
really
cool.
And so the reader is slightly Australian sounding, but does have had been in New Zealand, so understood, and a more bottom of the world kind of a sound than
I think I've been away too long. Maybe I've been away 7 years. I mean, I do go back, but then I'm usually around Pacific Island, like Samoan people. So it was just, again, even listening to that was a whole experience.
One of the lovely things too about my the British publisher is that they got me to re-edit the books and bring them up to date to republish them in Britain, and they asked for them to be more Kiwi. They wanted
wow.
Yes. So I was able to just put a bit more New Zealand description in there. So it's quite interesting with some of our things, like we call it a singlet. And call it a vest over there. So, I had to fight with the, to say, no, it's a singlet in New Zealand. It has to be that.
Has to be that.
It has to be that. So it was really quite interesting, the translation of some of the words, and, the ones that you decided you absolutely just had to have, you weren't going to change. But making it more Kiwi was so exciting for me.
Yeah, it was really cool when I discovered that you had audiobooks, because I've had other authors on the show, Pacific Island authors, and I just want more of our writers. I would love for them to release their books in audiobook format. In this day and age, when I think about young people and in terms of attention span, and maybe even just being able to buy books or have access to actual books, like I feel like audiobooks is just a whole another way to connect at a more intimate level, with the stories that are being told. So I was stoked when I found out that you had audiobooks, and I just would love to see more of our Pacific Island authors release audiobooks, release their stories in audio format.
And like you say, it's a way of making books more accessible, hugely more accessible. I particularly in the COVID era, being able to get ebooks and audiobooks when we couldn't get into stores to get physical paperback books and things like that was huge. So I felt again very blessed that these things were available for me. And I'm absolutely with you on the having Pacifica people and their works come out in audiobooks. Particularly what I'd love to hear is so for audiobooks, people like myself, we don't record our own books.
Right.
It is a utterly special skill to be able to do the voices and the emotion and everything in an audiobook. So they have people who are voice actors who do it well. But there are one or two authors who do actually read their audiobooks because they've got that amazing skill. They just have that gift. But I would love to hear audiobooks, audio versions of some of our fantastic Pacifica poets. Could you imagine them reading their poetry in their voice? Expression with their language and their accent and everything like that would just be amazing. So we need to find a way to collaborate, things happening.
Because sorry, go ahead.
And everything like that. So it's like, needs to happen though.
I understand. like I've looked into like Audible and those companies, and like you said, there are actual voice actors, but even the timing, the pacing of the storytelling,
Mm.
it's an art. Like there are very strict guidelines. The breathing, everything. There, it sounds so weird, but there are very strict guidelines for recording. But yeah.
When I had the pleasure of going over to Britain a few years ago, and I went to Oxford to the studios where my books were, audio books were produced by ISIS Productions. And honestly, the voice actors, they're in this tiny little claustrophobic room. Totally the most unromantic thing you could ever imagine in your world, where it's minute, the padded walls, just them basically in a microphone, and the screen which the manuscript comes up on. And that just made me even more in awe of their skill, that in that horrid physical environment. It was just awful, and probably cold as well. Stuck in a little room in this booth for hours on end, bringing to life the story. I thought, wow, that is just such an incredible skill. So, huge kudos to all the poor souls out there. I'll say poor souls who do these audio books, who voice these books, because to be able to do that and do it so well is incredible.
And you were mentioning poetry earlier. I'm the same. Like I really struggle to connect. Poetry is not my thing. Like I really do. And obviously as a teacher, if there's a poetry unit, you're like, I'm trying to think of so many different ways to engage my students and to keep it interesting and fun. But what got me hooked on poetry was listening to it, like
Yes.
audio. When I listened to Jessica Care Moore, I listened to her book, We Want Our Bodies Back. And actually the reason why I connected with her was I watched this YouTube video where a dance group or a choreographer in the UK, they had collaborated. And I just was listening to her and watching the movement and realized, wow, I've never seen anything like this. And it was basically like Black women, they want their bodies back. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to get her book, and I listened to the whole thing, and I realized then, oh no, you do like poetry, but how about trying to listen to the audio versions? And so since then, that's what I've been doing, is just, if I'm curious about a book of poetry, I will try and find the audio, and that's how I get connected. Like it takes me. It's just audio versions. Like really, it just really takes me away to a different space, and
The great things, literature and a love of books, doesn't have to be about the printed word on a page. Printed books are amazing, but also, I love graphic novels, for example. Another fantastic way to be able to reach people, to tell stories. So technology's been able to expand what this whole concept of literature is, and so it should. Surely part of being imaginative is to find imaginative ways to bring story to people, whether it's the spoken word through theatre, whether it's, like say, the audio books, the printed books. I'm a huge fan of the printed book. I find it quite difficult to read ebooks just because it's a screen. I like to have the paper, turn the pages, feel the heft, the weight of it. That's just how I like to experience it. But everyone has a different way that they do like to experience it. So it's fantastic now that there are so many avenues to be able to do that. It's not limited by anything, really.
Were you nervous? Are you nervous when friends and family read your books? Like, is that exciting for you? What is some of the feedback? I mean, with all your siblings, have they had the opportunity to
It's terrible. I remember when my first book came out and I heard from somebody, there's a wee review in the Listener. I honestly felt sick. I was so nervous about, oh my gosh, what are they going to say? So that whole part of it's quite challenging. You feel extraordinarily vulnerable when you've spent all this time creating this book baby and you put it out to the world. What are people actually going to think? So it's like, phew. Generally, for the most part, people have loved the work and everything which is fantastic. I've had a few bad reviews. You always do. Anything is subjective. People like it or they don't. Everyone's different, so you just have to roll with that. But it is. It never gets any more comfortable, shall we say? Even after time, you do, because we all worry about what people think about us and our. So, yeah, and when you do get a good review, it's like, oh. And when you get the other thing I love is you get like the little email from readers who say, oh, I love the book or anything like that. That sort of personal feedback's just absolutely lovely as well. It makes you think, oh yeah, no, that was all worth it. Your family, they pretty much tell you that they love your work because they're being kind and nice, which is let's hope it goes that way. But you have to be a bit careful that they don't think that the people that you've written into the story are them.
Yeah.
Are you talking about me, Vanda? Is that were you giving a dig? Were you digging at me? No.
There was a time when you were the chair of the Copyright Licensing New Zealand. I totally buzzed out at this piece of information. And I was just wondering, what was it like to be able to work in that space? Because you served on the board for a number of years. Copyright Licensing New Zealand.
Yeah.
How cool.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, we need voices around tables. So I was on the board of Copyright Licensing New Zealand for some time, which was a fantastic board. And the whole purpose of this is so the copyright licensing is so that authors and writers and creative people have the right to earn fair compensation for their work, for their creative work out there. Because, to be honest, people are always trying to rip it off. People are trying to get stuff for free. People are trying to benefit from your work without actually giving you any compensation or payment for that. So for me, it was really important to be a part of the group who was making sure that, for example, schools had licenses so that they could use writers' works and the writers would actually get some monetary compensation. Because, seriously, people, if you want our creative works, if you want to enjoy reading our books and things, we've got to eat. We've got to pay our power bill. We've got to have a roof above our head. We need to actually get some compensation or money for that. We don't do it entirely for love. It's just,
as much as people say, people who say, we do it out of love. And it's like, but people have families, like creatives, writers, musicians, like they have families. Like everyone has to make a living somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so it was really good to be part of that board. And I felt such an honor when they wanted me to be chair of that board as well. Getting involved in governance, it was fantastic because you learned so many great skills. Learned about working with people, learned about the bigger picture, and things as well. So that was one of the highlights of for me was being the chair of Copyright Licensing New Zealand. And another highlight at the moment is president of the New Zealand Society of Authors overall. And again, you got to be brave and put your hand up because sometimes you can think, am I up to that? Am I worthy? Can I do that? Yes, you can. And organisations will give you the nice supports underneath to support you on that way. But I think it's very important to have, Māori voices at the table, to have Pacifica voices at the table, to have women at the table on many of the boards. Diversity is really, really important. One of the nice things about being on the Copyright Licensing New Zealand board as well was, I was there as a creative person, because you often look at board structures and they seem to be loaded with lawyers and accountants and people like that. But, you need people from all across the community. You need your creative people. You need your people who are focused on health and community. You need your actually community people in there as well. So I feel, very blessed to have been able to be part of these organisations. But part of that is actually, I'm prepared to put my hand up and sit at a table.
You know, you mentioned New Zealand Society of Authors, Te Puni Kaituhi o Aotearoa. For anyone who is watching or listening, how would they, what do they need to do to become part of the society, or at least, do you know what I mean? Like up and coming writers or indie writers? What's...
So my background with the New Zealand Society of Authors is that way back when I first started writing, I joined the society. I wasn't a published author at that stage, but I wanted to be part of a community, a writing community, to find other people out there who were authors, and also they had access to some really cool resources. So if you remember, you could apply for like a mentorship program, or you could apply for a manuscript assessment. So I joined the society. So I just, it's a annual fee, and I became at that point an associate member. And I applied to get, for my very first novel, Overkill, I applied for the assessment program to see if I could get one. And I got awarded an assessment, which for me was fantastic, because, to get your novel read by a stranger who knew the industry was important, because, a lot of people give their work to family members or people like that, and they're not going to tell you what they need. They're going to say, oh, it's lovely, it's great. They're too kind. They're not going to tell you that what you actually need to get fixed. So my novel was assessed by a wonderful editor, Stephen Stratford, who unfortunately passed away very recently, actually. But his feedback was amazing, because the first thing he said on his report was, I loved this novel. So can you imagine the confidence boost that gave me? And then a list of things I needed to change. So it's like, I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that. So by joining the Society of Authors, I actually got access to those services. And also, for example, when I moved to Dunedin, I found the local branch, and so I get moving to a strange city. I went along to a few meetings, met other authors, and the fabulous support that everyone gave each other, because everyone in that whole community was really, really positive and uplifting and helpful. So that, I think, was sense of community was one of the hugest and the best benefits of joining the New Zealand Society of Authors. But also, other things it offers, so there's professional development. There's all sorts of courses that you can do online, or, in person. We have road shows where we travel around to the cities and the smaller towns and organise writing workshops and things like that. There's the whole advocacy thing. Like I said, we talk about copyright. There's reviews of the copyright, public lending rights. So if you're an author and you've got your books in public libraries, you can register each year, and then you get a small monetary compensation for the books held in libraries that people are going, so that people can go and get these books for free and enjoy your work and everything, but you get a little bit of compensation. So we do lots of advocacy work. And the other really important element of it is we're part of PEN International. So PEN sort of looks at writers, for example, and your journalists or your people like that who end up being imprisoned because of their work and their writing, or some even killed for their writing. So it's lobbying and making sure that people in that capacity, where they're reporting, getting that sort of like freedom of information and things out there, that they are kept safe, or if they are in prison, that they're not forgotten, that their voices, and it's that advocating. So it's an organisation that I've been part of for a long time, and really just supports writers across all, from the very beginning writers to our wonderful, wonderful established writers, and everyone in between.
You're also a fencer. Like I cannot interview you and not talk about, like, you wear so many hats and you are involved in so many different spaces in the community. But then I'm like, but wait, family, we need to talk about Vanda the fencer. I mean, since high school,
Mm.
today,
Okay.
actually, today you were running a fencing competition. Please
Yep.
tell us about your journey as a fencer.
Well, I started, as you say, at high school, and one of the reasons why I took up fencing at high school was because Vanda, the imaginative dreamer, book-loving girl, always loved doing everything sort of like Arthurian legend, knights on horseback, that kind of thing, swords. But I wanted to be the chick with the sword, not the not the one being rescued. I wanted to be the one rocking up with.
You're no damsel in distress. I know that now.
So, fortunately, Karangaroo High School in Hastings offered fencing as a sport. So I thought, I'll give that a try, and absolutely loved it. I mean, you're playing with swords. What's not to love? Come on, people. And it's a wonderfully therapeutic way at the end of your day to take out of your frustrations is to attack a friend with a sword. So, but it's also one of these fantastic sports you can do throughout your entire life, and you can go away and then come back to it. So I fenced through high school and university, but then after university, when I worked in the Hawke's Bay back then, at that stage there were no clubs there, so 20 years not fencing, and then moved back to Dunedin, joined up and did it again very actively. So in our club, Claymore Swords Club here in Dunedin, we have members who are in their 70s still actively fencing. It's a sport you can do throughout the ages. So I compete. I still hope to compete in veterans and trying to fence. I'd like to fence internationally again. I've represented New Zealand at Commonwealth Veterans, and I'd like to think that I'll still be. I have this imagination of me at 80, even with a Zimmer frame, sword in one hand, frame in the other, go really enjoying it, because it's a great way to keep fit. It's really social. It's really strategic. It's a very satisfying sport because you're doing something very intensely physical, but also it's a thinking game. You're trying to outwit your opponent as well. So, and me being me, boots and all. So, I coach, I help organise and run the club. I was on the board of Fencing New Zealand for 10 years. So it's fantastic. So if anyone wants to learn fencing, Google, find your local club, give it a go.
That's awesome. I'm nothing you tell me now surprises me, because I'm just like, strategy. I bet she studied the science behind the sport as well.
Yeah.
I love it.
You can totally nerd out. It's awesome.
Both your sons got into fencing as well, and I recently read an article on your son Corey, who's a third-year medical student and was nominated for a Blues Award recognizing his achievements in fencing. Goodness, she must be a proud mother.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. No, he's he fenced yesterday and won the Fencing South Championships foil competition yesterday. So he's done very well and fenced overseas. And like you say, third-year medical student, and very proud of him for everything he does, but just also for the fact that for him, he's was born without a right hand. So he's done everything that he's managed to achieve, as people would call him disabled, but he's just so incredibly abled. He does everything, and again, he's like, the apple does not fall far from the tree. Signs up, and he's on committees and writing review shows and all that thing as well. But so he's very dynamic and fun young man to be around. So proud of both my boys.
Oh, awesome, Mum. We got an awesome mother right here. I have to give you your flowers. The theme for Fijian Language Week is nurture, preserve, and sustain the Fijian language. So I was wondering, coming from a huge, having lots of siblings, coming from a huge Fijian family, growing up in Aotearoa, how have you been able to stay connected to your Fijian roots, over the years, or even community and just language? Like, how have you maneuvered those spaces living in Aotearoa?
And that is a great question, because it's been a lifelong journey. So for me, my father was Fijian, but my father died when I was 10 years old, and I was the youngest of the family. So when he passed away, the situation was difficult for my mum, and we were all the family in the Tauranga area at that stage, and my mum and I and some of my other siblings, we were taken by a Presbyterian minister, and we sort of stayed with her and moved with her over to Hawke's Bay. So I kind of lost that physical connection with many of my brothers and sisters who are living in Tauranga, and got a bit isolated over in Hawke's Bay. So I didn't get to connect with that whole Fijian side for many, many years. But one of the wonders of doing the PhD and coming into this, working for the Va'ao Tautai Centre for Pacific Health as an adult, is over the last 4 or 5 years, I've really been able to reconnect, which was fantastic, because it was really felt like something that was really missing in my life. I knew I had all this heritage. My brothers and sisters, when we get together, it's fantastic and awesome, everything like that. But for many of them, they've lost their Fijian language. There's only one brother who probably can speak it with any fluency, and some of the others sort of know some words and bits and pieces. So reconnecting with that as an adult has been such a gift and such a blessing, and feeling that, yes, I am Fijian, and being able to say that when you're sort of being brought up in very much a European culture. And for me, personally, I'm a very pale Fijian. Oh, the hair. Man, have I got the hair. But so, I may not look the part, but I feel that part. So being confident to actually say, yes, I am a Fijian New Zealander now is fantastic. The language one is really, really interesting, because I'm now really, really interested in the language. So my goal over the next 5 to 10 years is actually to start learning Fijian language. Haven't quite figured out how I'm going to do that yet. So I do know a number of people now in the Dunedin community who speak Fijian, and so I'll probably start to sort of shoulder tapping them and sort of wear some starters, parts like that. So it's slightly daunting thought, learning a language at this age, but it's also something that I really want to do for that, again, that connection, and just also realizing how important language is to how people connect with their community and with their heritage and their ancestry, and the importance of sustaining language and making sure that languages do continue, because I think it's so easy. Well, they say it only takes a generation to lose an at-risk language or a smaller language. So I think that's vitally important. So I love that they do these language weeks and highlight languages, and it's going to be important for me personally, and part of that long-term journey that I'm taking.
What's coming up next for Vanda Symon, the author?
Oh, Vanda Symon, the author, has end of this month, holy crikey, deadline to finish the next novel and get that submitted to my publisher, which is a new Sam Shepard novel, which will be coming out early next year. So Vanda, the author, is extremely busy, and every waking moment where she's not doing the day job is pretty much writing and polishing this novel. So there you go. You're going to get another book to read soon.
Oh my gosh. We love these surprise announcements. You're going to hear fam. Oh my goodness. Sorry.
I'm down.
Exciting. Oh, that's exciting. And I've right throughout the show, like, we've been highlighting Vanda the author, Vanda mum, Vanda the research fellow, Vanda the radio host, and many, many hats that you wear. But and fencer. Outside of all of that, how do you in terms of self-care, how do you look after yourself when you're not doing all these cool things that you love to do? How do you take care of your health and, you know?
Well, I think that's something you actually have to be really careful to make sure you do take the time to do, because we do get very, very busy in our lives. And there are demands from everywhere, you know, demands as a mother, demands from work, demands for as being a wife, demands from community, demands from the organisations and everything like that. So you do need to find things that make you happy. Now, I've always been a kind of a girl who I find pleasure in really simple things. So weirdly enough, you know, I have a few like little ritually type things that I like to do. So if people who do follow me on Instagram or things like that know that I have a thing for tea trays.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
So one of the simple, and it is a simple pleasure, is that in this really busy time where everything seems to be rush, when I make a tea tray up, it's, you know, I prop a teapot, I'll go out into the garden, I'll find a nice flower, cut myself a nice flower, come into the house, match the flower to some of the tea. I use my bone china, you know, the frilly teacups. I match which one goes which cup, and my teapot and milk jug, and just make a beautiful little tea tray, and then take that to my office space and just enjoy that simple pleasure of taking some time to have tea in a special way. And it feels like a really special little treat. So that's one of my little self-care things. Another one is, you know, exercise is really important. And it's really important, and everyone knows it's important for mental health. So taking that time, and that's where fencing is a bonus, because not only is it exercise, but it's also quite social and things like that. But I do make sure I try to walk. So if I can, I often walk home from work, which takes 45 to 50 minutes. And it's just a good way at the end of the day to take the work off, get some exercise, and transition. And the other thing is, I like jigsaw puzzles, you know, like word games, crosswords, you know, those seeker-find word things, because you just kind of got to be in that moment concentrating on that page, and it's really satisfying when you finish one. It's really unsatisfying when you don't finish a Sudoku. That can be frustrating, but just taking a few moments, even if it's 5 minutes, just to spend some time doing a crossword puzzle, because that's time for you. So when time is precious, it's just little ways. Simple.
That's nice. That's nice. Book recommendations as we're starting to wrap up, or take the opportunity to plug your writing. Please go ahead.
I always much prefer, no, I'm not. I much prefer plugging other people's writing. So, like I said, I read a lot, and I read a lot of broadly non-fiction and fiction. So I've always got a non-fiction book on the go, and I've always got fiction books on the go. So a few books that I've read recently, because I had the pleasure of actually interviewing these authors, but you know, that have really stuck with me. So JP, or Josh Pomare, is a New Zealand writer, and he's doing really, really well overseas, originally from back blocks of Rotorua, and his most recent book's called The Wrong Woman, that I read recently because he was touring with Val McDermott and Michael Rowbotham. So I love that as a Kiwi author. The Wrong Woman. And again, if reading that, Michael Rowbotham's a fantastic Australian crime writer, and his recent book, Lying Beside You, it was the first time I'd read these two particular characters that just the characters really caught me. So I'm going to have to go back and read the earlier books of the series just because I love the characters. And so, Lying Beside You by Michael Rowbotham, and he just had these, Cyrus Haven's one of the characters, who's a guy, and Evie Cormack, who's this really interesting young woman who she can sense if people are lying. She can tell if you're lying or not, which is a skill, you know, it's a gift and it's a curse. But these characters absolutely captivated me. And then in the non-fiction department, I read a book recently called Murder Isn't Easy, The Forensics of Agatha Christie. So, but by Carla Valentine. And it's just a nonfiction book. It ties in the forensic science that Agatha Christie used in her plots. Interestingly, she was a chemist as well.
Wow.
But and then gives you the background, like the history of that science and how it came about. So that sort of satisfied my literature-loving nerd and my forensic science nerd all in one book.
Wow. I'm excited because now I'm just like hearing you and I'm like, I need to find these books. I need to like read more New Zealand authors. So it's been so interesting to hear you, drop some of these names, and I'm excited.
I'm very good at buying books and not good at getting to read them. So I've been really, again, this journey of mine and rediscovering my heritage and things like that is actually enjoying all our Pacifica writers. So I recently bought the Beats of the Pau by Maria Samuela, and also Va'a, which was edited by Lani and Cecilia Iruati. So, more books that I've got to find the time to read. I just need more reading time. But I've got to write the novel first. Not allowed to do I write the novel.
Since Vanda didn't like promote, and she likes promoting other authors. I'm just gonna put it out there. And fam, if you're watching or if you're listening to us on Spotify and Google Podcasts, check out Vanda's writing. Over the series, the Sam Shepard series, Overkill, The Ringmaster, Containment, Bound. And you heard it here. There's another book coming. Check out her work, vandasymon.com. Symon with a Y, Symon. And then Faceless is another book. So you will not be disappointed. I mean, I don't know if I've ever been so hooked on crime writing. I read a lot of memoirs and YA fiction. I read a lot of middle school books because I'm curious about what my students are reading. I want to be up to date and know what the latest books are that they're interested in. But Vanda Symon, the crime writer, is something else. So you will not be disappointed, fam. Check it out. Support, New Zealand authors. Support Pacific Island authors. Support our women of the Moana who are just smashing goals and doing the most and wearing different hats in our communities there in New Zealand. There's my plug, vandasymon.com. Go for it.
You can be my now.
Hey, I could totally. No. As we wrap up the show, I ask guests just to wrap up the show with some words of wisdom or encouragement, maybe for up and coming writers or just anyone wanting to, go after their goals and dreams. But before I give you the opportunity, Vanda, I just want to say a huge Vinaka, thank you so much for sharing space. It is such an honor. It is. I just can't. It is such an honor to have you have you here on the show today. I'm a fangirl, so I'm going to stop. But I wanted to, we're in October now. Wish you all the best with the deadline you've got coming up. And just with the different community spaces that you're in, continue to be the change, continue to advocate for our communities that need those voices at the table. Super inspirational. I love your vibe, love your work. So, blessings. God bless, all the best for the remainder of the year.
Thank you so much, Rosa. And I just want to also a shout out to you and huge appreciation for what you do, highlighting all our wonderful Pacific creative people with your podcast. And I don't know how you fit it in with all your time as well. So I say, my final message to people would be, if you're interested in writing or anything creative, is have a go. Just actually have a go. Don't worry about people judging you. Do it for you because, what you need to express in your heart. Read a lot, read widely. Don't just stick to one thing. Read everything that you possibly can. And put the words on a page. Give it a go. It's very fulfilling for yourself, but also if you can actually, if you do get published, but there are all sorts of different ways to get published now, it is really exciting to get your work out there. And we all need creativity. We need, I want more books to read. So come on, people, write novels so Vanda can read them.